Okay, we're going to open the meeting at 7:02, the Berlin Select Board for November 20th. Open session public meetings are subject to being videotaped. Your image and voice may be recorded. And we've got approval of minutes for November 6th regular meeting. And I had a question on the executive session, so maybe if we have time tonight, we'll go into executive session so I can ask my question.
Will it be going in anyways?
I don't think so.
I think we're only going to go into executive session if we wanted to talk about the minutes.
The minutes.
Oh, okay.
Which
But
we'll
anyway,
do
we've
that.
got the regular session meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I will move to approve the November 6th regular meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, anything, changes or comments or whatever? Nope.
Yeah, good.
Okay, then we'll call for a vote. Seeing as how I wasn't there, I'm going to abstain.
Stone eye.
Hawkins, aye,
Okay.
or ayes.
Oh, did I
Ayes.
screw it up for you?
No, it's, I had to forward back. Peggy and I trying to figure out the...
Creatures of habit.
Chris, can I ask you, Dee and I were talking about this and trying to figure out the best way to handle the executive session minutes. Would you prefer that we just put them on the next time we have executive session, or?
Unless it's some kind of an emergency that you know
Just
someone's going to be
wait.
asking for them, or,
Okay,
yeah. Like you asked when you first got on.
Right.
You know, so we have a meeting with
Right.
executive session, then we have to go into executive session the next time to approve. It's
Right, which
just,
creates
you
an
know,
executive session that you have to approve the minutes. You end up in this never-ending...
Yes,
Unless you-
never-ending executive session.
Right.
fair. Okay, that works.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is the general public comment.
I'm not seeing anyone racing to the front of the room or raising hands.
No,
Neither's Eric.
guess not.
Hold them back.
Could you hold back the crowd, Eric? All right. Then we've got our general department update, which is the police.
Still want to bump into anybody?
Yeah.
Did you get a haircut?
I did. Every
Okay.
2 weeks.
All right.
All right, so month of October. So let's start with old business. The TA and myself, during the final process, the bid was awarded for the antennas to Allstate, right, out of Kentucky. So, we just finished up some of the last paperwork this week, and hopefully we can get on their schedule ASAP
Nice.
to get our antennas up. Let's see, the month of October, we handled 740 calls for service. 9 of those involved criminal charges. We had 19 motor vehicle crashes, which is up, and 9 with injuries, which is up. 68 motor vehicle stops and 30 citations. Jax has arrived, as you guys know. He's already been on 2 calls with Sergeant Gilchrist with positive results, and on Friday, he is going to Concord, New Hampshire.
Start training.
They're asking for comfort dogs at the hospital where we just had
Oh.
the shooter.
Yep.
Boy.
So Sergeant Gilchrist called me this morning. I told him absolutely. Let's see, Halloween, successful evening. As you know, we had no acts of vandalism or whatnot. We kind of divided in Concord between several groups of us. We hit the 2 major areas, Echo Village as well as Highland Ridge. Great spot up there on Highland Ridge. Hopefully lessens the crowd a little bit up at Echo Village. But Carterville was packed again once again, and visited multiple families having parties. That's been a ritual for decades. So. Full-time positions, Scott has started. He's in field training. Thomas and Alex started today. Scott started his first week doing policy and procedures, and he is now on the road, as well as Alex and Thomas are both doing policy and procedures this week. prior to entering the academy, which starts next Monday. I did attach the ACO report, which came in, which shows a dozen calls last month for her. And impacts the budget, academy tuition and uniforms. I budgeted $3,500 for the academy. I think we just paid a $6,400 tuition bill. And one officer out of the three was $2,480 in uniforms. And that was the bare minimum.
How much was that again?
$6,400 for tuition,
The uniform, sorry, I missed that.
$2,480. And that was the bare minimum because he already had a lot of his own equipment. So that's just jackets, pants, and shirts. So, yeah, a little bit of a hit. So, and the other two will be getting uniforms in April. So,
Are you anticipating reserve fund transfers on those, or are you waiting till we get further on in the year?
I want to wait till we get further on. There's other, may have to limit outside training other than MPTC free training, so may have to use the training budget for it, but we'll see. Yeah, time will tell.
Have you had any luck? I know last time you were here, you said that you had the opportunity to speak to Governor Healy
Yes.
about funding for Bridge Academy, because it's just not slamming Berlin.
So,
Left coast to right coast.
yeah, so the Bridge Academy, we did get back 9,000?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I think we're in good shape. I'm on the last officer for the Bridge Academy, and I think the balance in the account was 42. So we've actually recouped most all the money that we've
Nice.
spent through a grant.
Okay.
So I'm hoping, like, as soon as he finishes the Bridge Academy, I want to close the account out, and that way that money can get back to the town.
So are you good now for positions? Are you full?
Right
now?
Yeah, but remember, we will be full
When
with
they
a target
come on
date
board.
around August 1st.
Yeah.
So we still have
Okay.
9 more months to ride this, but we're doing okay. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the amount of overtime we're spending, but shifts need to be filled.
Have you used the drone at all?
The last time a drone was, well, other than training, last time it was up was that missing autistic adult.
Nice.
But yeah, we are trying to plan some more training. Right now, 2 of them went for taser training today, so we're short-staffed and we still have to do the training. So I'm hoping to do prior to snow flying, another training for drones without the leaves on the trees this time.
Oh,
So, give us a little bit different perspective, so. Yeah, it's up and available, so,
very cool. Hope you don't need to use it.
yeah.
Questions?
Part of budget process, don't we kick it off with staff reviews? Have you managed to do reviews on all your staff?
Well, I don't do reviews on the officers. I only do reviews on civilian staff.
Are there formal reviews of the officers?
No.
I believe they were going to work on a document that you could use, or was that fire?
It's probably fire.
It's not in the union contract.
Oh,
It's something that we should talk about in the next round.
Well, I mean,
Right.
whatever group it was, it did not happen, so.
Yeah.
But I remember talking about it in one of the
Yeah,
negotiations.
I'm on my 29th year, I've never had a review.
Right, because I think that could lead to some issues, because then it's no way to sort of give people positive feedback, in a more formal way, but
Yeah.
also document things that could be improved. So if it's
Yeah.
a habitual problem and slowly goes downhill,
Yeah.
there's not an easy way to say that's happened.
Yeah, I'm not against them. It's not that I'm for them, but I'm definitely not against them.
And
I think with posts, we're doing a review of every employee right now. So that's a pretty thorough background review on every employee.
And just keep things in the file if there need
Yeah,
be.
and this is the last year, I'm up this year along with, I think, 2 others, which actually the town administrator will do mine. And then we're into 3-year certifications, so.
But post would only catch something if they have other outside employment that gives them problems. If they've,
It has to be reported through me, for post. You have to, but which is, pretty definitive scope that has to go into them.
right, and there's probably some feedback would be worthy of giving people that's short of
Yeah.
writing them up and filing something with post, because
Yeah.
we all have
Yeah.
both off days and areas where we could get better at.
Yeah.
Is it, the reason we don't do it is the union contract doesn't allow it? Or,
It's not in the union contract. Fire does have one in theirs, police does not, and we do it for all the non-union employees. We did that back in October.
Mhm.
They were due, was it the 13th? No, I forget the date.
Probably middle of
Those
October.
are done. Yeah, for all non-union.
right.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, and we should, I
Yeah.
can definitely look into it.
On me,
as
I
part of
somehow
the next
thought when we did
contract.
annual reviews of all employees, it was all employees and not all non-union employees, so.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, maybe you and Kristen can talk about it
Yep.
and let us know what you
Yeah.
come up with.
Yeah. Yeah, figure out how we can implement them.
Yep.
Okay. The ACO reports look good. I was just going to ask you, how do you think she's working out?
It's just great.
Good?
Great. Constantly, whether it's phone calls or emails, constantly in speaking with them. With this past last week, we did speak with CMRPC about regionalization of an animal control officer. So, discussions are there. I think our ACO is maxed out with her capacity, because they're talking about bringing in Boylston and West Boylston as well.
Mm.
But I think CMRPC will help us. Lancaster, Bolton, and us have the same ACO, as well as Foxborough, Littleton, and Stowe. So I think Foxborough, Littleton, and Stowe are talking about coming to us and saying, hey, let's, get her equipped, and, the biggest thing is they need a vehicle. Let's split it 6 ways and possibly 7 ways if she takes on Harvard. So, and then, but the biggest thing is we need a host town,
Mm.
which is the town that's going to issue the check, issue the health benefits, whatnot, so.
And to make sure there aren't too many towns involved. I mean, you're gonna need a part-time person in addition to
Yeah.
a full-time person,
Yeah.
along with benefits and a vehicle, so.
Yeah, which I spoke with the ACO about, and she says she does have people that she can call that will step in for her right now. She needs a day off or a few hours off, so.
Would it change things if you were going to fill or ask her to fill the animal inspector position?
No.
It wouldn't change
No,
things?
she's the animal inspector for a lot of the other towns as well.
All right.
So it'd be, the only issue we have is that animal inspector reports to the Board of Health. ACO
Gotcha.
Reports to me in this town, but it is the town administrator, I think, in one other town or 2 other towns, but it doesn't fall into the police department. So the whole thing with, obviously, regionalization is that we all have to come up into the standard, the same kennel fees, the same pickup fees, the same everything fees across the board. I mean, obviously, some communities have leash laws, we don't. I didn't never see one passing in this town. But just to try to keep the job, that's one of our issues we have is there's things that she does in other towns that we don't do here, and she has to check in and keep track that, oh wait, I'm in Berlin, I can't do that. That's right, and that's what we do in Lancaster, not in Berlin. So,
Mhm.
but that's one discussion that we have. We need to come up under one guideline for SOPs.
Okay. I just didn't know whether she would have enough bandwidth
Yeah.
to do both of those positions in
Yeah, I
Berlin.
mean, you think, we're actually on the higher side for calls from this meeting we went into. I think we're on the higher side, and to have a dozen last month,
Yeah.
I mean, I think she can handle.
Well, it sounded like she was doing something just about every day, it's either returning calls or
Yeah.
making calls again, or,
Yep, yeah, and she does have her husband that helps her. He's certified as well, so she does help him. So it's a win-win for us right now.
okay. Okay, good. Any other questions?
But
All
All
right.
good.
I'm good.
getting disappointed.
Oh, no, this is the week of Thanksgiving, Eric, so
Yep.
be thankful I have no questions.
Can I come the week of Christmas next?
No.
Should be the week of giving.
Mhm, the week of giving, mhm.
Yeah,
All right,
there
thank
you
you.
go.
Yep, thank you.
All right, we're moving on to the town administrator report.
Okay. So FY25 budget packages have been distributed and are due back November 30th. We did have 2 budget kickoff meetings last week on Tuesday, And I wanted to take a minute to highlight some of the key information that went into the budget memo. We looked at inflation over the past 12 months, which has slowed to 3%, down from 8.7% over the previous 12 months. But unfortunately, everything is compounded, so you're unlikely to see the costs that you see now go back down. So we still have to look at careful budgeting to address the overall impact of several years of inflation, because we were at sub 3% levels in about the past 9 years before these past 2 years. As everyone knows, FY24 was a very challenging budget year after 2 years of pretty lean budgeting during COVID-19. We did increase our tax levy by 4%. And even with that 4%, needed to utilize almost $400,000 in free cash to fund the regional school district budget, largely due to unanticipated increases in special education costs not funded by the state, which are mandated. We have made our voices clear, and our legislators have heard that the cities and towns need additional assistance with this funding. It's critically important funding, but we need the state to basically step up and assist the local communities in making sure that those needs are met and fully funded. One of the things they did is a bit of a supplemental budget on the back end to address the 14% increase that they allowed for special education costs up front without a coordinated, what's the word?
Corresponding.
Thank you, a corresponding increase to cities and towns. So that did help a little bit for 23. And we're hopeful that as those payments get paid in arrears, that we will be in better shape for FY25. But again, it's a flux of students. It waxes and wanes, so it all depends on the students that come in and out of the district and what their needs are. So it's a difficult one to predict. Revenue projections do continue to trend positively, particularly in the areas of building permits, meals tax, and motor vehicle excise. But as I mentioned, the budget is impacted by the rising special education costs, continued commercial devaluation, and also a significant and somewhat unexpected rise in home values is increasing taxes this year. So the average single-family home in FY23 was $558,000, and the average single-family home tax bill was $7,700. For FY24, the average single-family home is valued at $653,000, and the average tax bill is just over $8,300. So the average tax bill on a single-family home will increase approximately $600 to $650, slightly higher than we did anticipate, which we stressed very clearly that this was an estimate, as we went through the budget process last year for FY24. No one can predict that home values were going to jump $100,000. That's a pretty substantial increase. So, the challenge is we face needs, as more is demanded of all of our departments, especially public safety officials in light of expanded real estate development, needing more staff hours to serve a growing population here in town. We're trying to be sensitive to taxpayer impact while also balancing where we are in terms of the town's financial position and our ability to serve the public. As I mentioned at the tax rate hearing that we had a couple of weeks ago, we may need to consider a single tax rate moving forward to keep the tax burden from continually shifting to the residents as commercial devaluation continues. And there is always that possibility we may potentially have to look at unutilized levy capacity. With all of this in mind, the way that we set forth parameters for preparing the FY25 budgets was taking a very conservative approach. They are to be level funded with the exception of a 2% cost of living increase. And there, as you had mentioned at the select board meeting and also in talking to personnel, if there's anything we can do to adjust that cost of living increase as we go along this path, we will definitely look at it, but I want to make sure that all of our contractual increases are met, and those staffing needs that we desperately have to meet, particularly in the areas of public safety, highway, and social services, are hit before we look at potentially increasing a COLA. Another thing that we did this year was looking at 5-year outlooks from the department heads for staffing and non-capital expenses. And that will be used to help inform the budget process going forward, kind of similar to like a mini capital plan. And basically just looking at what the impact of those costs will be over the next few budget cycles. Capital planning has kicked off their work for the budget season, and we met on November 9th to review requests that were received from Highway, the Select Board, Police, and Fire. If you remember, the Select Board request was for the Brown Barn and the parking. We also discussed ARPA and CPA funding requests, and CPA will be meeting with the Capital Planning Committee in the upcoming weeks. Town Hall office hours. Town office's holiday hours. Let me try that again. I'm messing things up. Here over at this building, this is not public safety. This is just the town office's side. Will be as followed. This coming Wednesday, we will close at 2 p.m. except for the town clerk, who is open till 5 by state law to receive petitions. We will be closed Thursday, November 23rd, and Friday, November 24th. And then obviously Monday, December 25th, and Monday, January 1st, we will be closed as well. And then other sort of miscellaneous items that are going on, looking at a risk management grant through our insurance company to do an HVAC and plumbing assessment for the municipal offices. Also working on flooring replacement as funded as part of the FY24 capital plan here. Continuing to work on the BMS lease. And one of the conversations I've been having, as has Victoria with the COA, is the possibility of the Powderhouse News becoming a town-wide newspaper potentially going forward with some budgetary funding in order to keep that alive and expand it and provide more information and communicate with the residents in a better way. We also are trying to meet with Odyssey Advisors on retiree health insurance. It had to be rescheduled because they had a last-minute localized internet outage in Connecticut, believe it or not. But we do have a copy of their report and plan to present that to the board in December. We did do hybrid meeting trainings, and there are a couple of glitches we are still waiting on. Brittany was talking to the company today and trying to get those squared away, but everybody has now been trained. The laptops are here, they're in the rooms. As soon as we work out a couple glitches on the studio side, we will be ready to move forward, and we will be sending out an email letting folks know with instructions on exactly how to do that, but also everyone who attended the trainings will be able to run those meetings as well. There is potential funding for a COA van from Mass DOT. So the weekly rural director calls with Ann Goby have been great, and she's been really keeping us up to date as things come down the pike. So I have Victoria looking into that. As Chief mentioned, we discussed potentially regionalizing animal control services and putting in the radio equipment. Also met with some homeowners from Highland Ridge and Conservation Commission Chair Carolyn McDonald to discuss concerns that they have up there. There are a lot of concerns that go well beyond what conservation is dealing with, and what I've asked the residents to provide me with is a comprehensive list of all of their concerns so we can determine what the town can assist with, what's under our jurisdiction, and what is not. And I have made it clear that there are definitely things we can't help with. Unfortunately, those are issues that the residents will have to work on with the developer. But where we can assist, I want to make sure we are assisting. And I can say we certainly have the attention of the developer. They did ask to, their attorney asked to reach out to our attorney and make an introduction. So that is certainly a positive step in the right direction. And lastly, Friday had a very interesting presentation. Tim Wheeler and I met with CMRPC to discuss cottage housing and short-term rentals, which we may want to put a general bylaw on town meeting through the select board in May, because there is money being left on the table that we could be charging for short-term rentals. If we had a bylaw in place, we could require them to register with the town, get an annual license fee, and they could we could be getting back up to 6% in sales tax. That would be like Airbnb, Vrbo, those types of rentals. That's what I have for you.
So the Highland Ridge group is
Yes.
meeting with Conservation. Is it this Wednesday?
They met last Wednesday.
Yeah.
Because I had a phone call from someone at Highland Ridge today asking whether the meeting could be recorded.
There is no meeting. Their next meeting will probably be the spring because there is the cease and disorder on the work order through spring. So they being the Conservation Commission, do not anticipate the builders coming back.
I think I know what you're referring to, though. Mr. Venacasa has requested a meeting with all of the residents that I was notified is occurring tomorrow. We were asked to participate.
That's probably what she's
but
referring to.
unfortunately, it's not appropriate for the town to participate in a private developer matter with their residents. But it would be certainly useful to know what goes on at the meeting if the residents would like to share that information with us, which is probably what you're thinking of. And you
No,
know,
I was just going by the phone call that I
Yeah.
got.
It just
And
came
I
up.
actually pointed them to you to find out whether it was going to be recorded, or Roger, so.
Yeah, they
Um,
would have to do that themselves, unfortunately, because that really is a private matter when it's
I
a
didn't know
meeting
what kind of
called by the
meeting was.
developer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's probably, there was a pretty hot topic last week where the work order was stopped.
Mhm.
Apparently, people are coming up on their year anniversary there, and they have a punch list of items.
Mhm.
So their concern is, my warranty is going to run out for you to finish these, but you have a work order. And their attorney, the developer's attorney, gave a very jumbled, mumbled, specifically lack of direction response to a specific question by a resident on, will you honor our agreement? And that's where the comment went. Nothing specific. So the comment was, can somebody please reach out to Berlin Town Council to find out what we can do?
Yeah.
Well,
And
this particular resident, I believe, has in the past tried to get minutes from planning board in regards to Highland Commons, and I don't know whether she's wanted Conservation Commission minutes, but the planning board minutes couldn't be found. And so
Oh.
that's why she was wondering if this could probably be recorded. That's my guess.
Got it. Well, and what's interesting and challenging is, right, town council's role is only to advise the town. Unfortunately,
Right.
they can't advise the residents. That's not their role. And they can only advise the town, you know, in a confidential way, right? So we take the advice that we get from town council and use that as part of our decision-making process. The biggest concern that I see right now is there is a cease and desist, as Peg mentioned, but they're trying to get little things through. So first it was there's an HVAC system, and then apparently there's some issues with the garage doors, and then apparently, well, there's cabinets that might crack if they're left out in the winter. And so my biggest concern is a cease and desist means unless there's a safety issue that has some type of imminent threat, work is not going on. And by piecemealing and trying to get little pieces through, my concern would be that the developer is attempting to get to completion and attempting to get around the cease and desist. And that's what we are trying to avoid, because they need to get the site work done that has to be corrected through conservation before those units are complete.
Right, there are multiple units, I forget how many, quite a few, that they rattled off that need HVAC turned on, that need lines checked, so it was, where are you?
Well, I just wanted to be able to answer the phone caller's question.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. It's to maintain the sprinkler system, so people were complaining that they were voicing their concern, let me rephrase. They were voicing their concern that Concom was doing a disservice to them by allowing this work to get those units up. But as Concom tried to explain, it's a safety issue. If there is a fire, a leak, and those dwellings aren't protected, you have high risk of giant issue. So that's when the whole discussion about the punch list, and I have things, and my siding, and so it kind of.
If the developer followed the rules, then COMCOM wouldn't have to put on the.
And
cease and
that
desist.
was
I mean,
pretty much, and you felt for the people in the audience, because there was one gentleman who had sold his home and was told by the person doing the selling up there that he could move in by December. And this gentleman is basically, will be homeless in a few weeks because
It's
he has
not the
no.
first one, unfortunately.
No, it's not the first one. I was surrounded by multiple people that had happened to. And the comment again was, if the policies and the processes, and we had asked you to do things and you came prepared, how about show up to a meeting? We're done. We wouldn't be here. So,
Our
Well,
concern, oh, sorry.
my understanding is that the group up at Highland Ridge is working on getting their own attorney. So they
And that is the more appropriate path to take, since
Right.
they can't use our attorney.
exactly.
And I want to make sure that we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing on the town side in terms of enforcing code, zoning, planning, what planning board passed, anything that went through ZBA on the special permit side. That's really what we want to make sure. I also want to make sure that our residents are protected through the town in terms of what we can enforce that's under our jurisdiction, but without a more comprehensive understanding of the scope of all the problems, which is what I've asked for, I can't say, yes, we can help with that, no, we can't help with that. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. I think my biggest concern is if there's a cost to doing this, right? Because as you mentioned, there's people that can't move in. If the Conservation Commission were to say, we're going to lift the cease and desist and let you finish, the problem is the developer could easily walk away without remediating a lot of these issues. And there's nothing, unfortunately, to hold them to completing this project. They did actually ask if they could put a bond in place for completion of the work. We were advised against allowing that because, first of all, the costs can be exponentially larger once you get in and start doing the work, and then anything over that bond amount, it would be the responsibility of the town essentially to pay for and also do the work should the developer walk away. So, we're a small town, they are a large developer. I just want to make sure that the town and the residents are not being taken advantage of, and that's why I think it was important to get legal counsel involved.
yeah, twice they asked about the bond, and twice they were shot down because they don't understand why the town would turn down $150,000, and I'm thinking $150,000 is going to cover like two things.
Right.
So, but the chair made it very clear,
Yep.
and to basically stop asking. We're not going to take a bond.
Well, I didn't mean to railroad this into
No, I figured it would come
a
up.
huge conversation.
That's why I kind of put it in
I
the
just wanted to
report.
answer my phone call.
Fair enough.
All right. Any other questions for
At some
Kristen?
point, you have to explain to me more about how a single tax rate helps the residents. Because if we did a single tax rate this year, according to the spreadsheet provided by the assessor's office, the tax rate would be $17.94 a thousand instead of the $12.53. So that's what, 40% more? And so I don't get how 40% more would be better.
We'll have to see when we run everything through, because it's not necessarily when you look at depending on the values versus the devaluation. If the devaluation continues, you may reach a point where on the commercial side, it doesn't make sense to continue moving forward with that anymore. So it would have to reach that point where you bottom out, and it's costing the taxpayers more in picking up the commercial side of the burden. So we'd have to run the numbers and
Right.
see. It would only make sense if it.
Because if they're picking up more than their fair share, that or more than the equal share,
Yep.
then that will always help the homeowners.
Right, and
Even
it's
if that equal share,
proportional.
even if that is going down a little bit, because if this year, if we did it even, it would be a 40% increase in the taxes on top of what we already did, because 1794 to 15 or 1253.
It all depends, because when you take it out of the split tax rate, it gets a little, I mean, you have to also look at
Right.
proportionality too. So that's,
Right.
we'd have to look at all, oh, sorry, my computer's having a meltdown. Okay.
Well,
So just know when we
essentially,
get there, I'll
we would
want to
need-
know more, because
Sure.
Right.
the assessors, the first line in the assessor one is, we didn't do a split rate, this is
Right.
the tax rate.
Yep.
And when we did the split rate, the tax rate went from 1794 a thousand to 1253 a thousand, and so to me, that's a benefit to the homeowners.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was waiting.
No, that's
Okay.
fine.
All right, no, I'm waiting. I'll let it come down the line. You got anything else?
Um, just pointing out that the excess levy capacity, even if we tap into it, it's just increased taxes on folks. That because the town has done quite well for a very long time, that our ability to raise above the 2.5% without having to do an override is there. And we did research, I thought, a little bit last year about whether or not we could even put something as an override question so that a bigger than just town meeting could vote on the budget if for some reason we thought because I think we could raise the taxes, well, I wouldn't want to, but legally we could raise the taxes probably 6 to 10% because we have so much levy capacity without being forced by state law to do it, an override. And I'd love, again, and not in the last minute, but could we ask for an override vote, even if, or at least a vote of the taxpayers, if even if we didn't hit the levy capacity?
Yes, the answer to that is yes.
Which I thought so, yeah.
And so I went, and I didn't put that nuance in
Yep.
there, but that would be my recommendation, would be to do an override if we did end up at the point where the 2.5% that's allowed under Prop 2.5 was not enough to fund everything that was mandated, needed, et cetera. I would say we'd have to go to an override because, like you said, I think it gets more eyes on it. I think it's a fairer way to do it. I think it's very difficult to ask many segments of the population to come one night to a town meeting and sit and make a vote on one item, whereas if you have an election, they can come throughout the day. So I just think it's a fairer way of doing it.
It is, sadly, when you're coming in to vote, you don't get 4 hours worth of discussion on the issue, understand some of the nuances behind it. But yeah, I generally agree with that. And then when we're looking at the public safety budgets, the budget is really a reflection of what we think we'd like to have happen for response times. There's no, as far as I know, there's not really a law that says we have to have 3 officers on at the police, we have to have, 6 people on at the fire department. It's just when we start thinking about what we want for response times. And it's not sort of a flippant thing in that, getting the fire department to your door, in 2 minutes from the call costs more than getting them to your door 5 minutes from the call. Sure. Now, the thing is, if you're in a life-threatening situation, that 3 minutes can make a massive, matter of fact, if it's a fire, that 3 minutes can make a giant difference. Right. And it'd be interesting to have, I don't know how we have a broader conversation of where that line is. There's people who say, my taxes are too high, my taxes are too high, my taxes are too high. Well, would you be fine with lower taxes if it meant the fire department was there, 4 minutes later? Or that,
Or mutual aid has to come.
Right,
and
which is 10 minutes later. Or that, people are constantly complaining about speeding. You can see from the reports that, having an officer just sitting, waiting for someone to speed by is one of the things that sort of gets deprioritized when we have shifts that go unfilled. And I think that, personally, think that's a decent call to make. Are people willing to pay more in taxes to have that happen? And I think some people would say yes and no, but I think that's an interesting conversation to have. And as we go through budgets, I only look to you because you're in the audience right now, Chief Schardner, but that, it's easier on the fire department because that response time is easily measured. What does, one more officer per shift add to public safety? What does losing one officer per shift lose for public safety? And being very clear about that.
It doesn't change our response time, but it changes our responsibilities while we're working.
Right.
It gives us more time to do each one versus, I can't do Pleasant Street today because I'm at Cabela's for 3 hours on a shoplifter.
Right, or just, the town is covered when someone goes in for training, versus there's really nobody here if training happens and that,
It might be a good,
or sick or other things like that.
might be a good topic for coffee talk.
Yeah.
And Chief McClellan's not here, so I don't want to speak for him, but some of the conversations we've had is not so much on the fire side about expanding the department,
Right.
but the struggle to fill existing shifts
Right.
and to make sure
Yeah.
that we're not relying on mutual aid.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we have the same issue. We
Yeah.
have 20 to 30 shifts a month. We have one filled, out of 80. So, yeah, it can happen. You just try to do your best and rearrange and move around and
Yeah.
facilitate. And
We have had instances where people have had to wait,
Yeah.
and they're not happy about it, and we
Well-
do the best we can.
Well, and the fire side, I mean, we've talked about ALS, but some of that is at that first person there, how trained is that first person there? To have someone who's a paramedic and advanced life support trained is more expensive than someone who is some fairly advanced first aid, but it really is still first aid versus paramedics. I mean, sure, somewhere in the country, there's a police department that, like, in every police office car, there's someone who has some paramedic stuff, That's really, really expensive, but it helps in some circumstances, and those are just the two biggest ones.
That's
I mean,
time is of the essence, isn't it, with having a paramedic and,
right, well, and that sort of stuff. And
Right.
sadly, we're not at the table because it's a separate board. But the school is like, class size impacts budgets, and if you had classes of 50, the education is not as great, but it's much cheaper on the taxpayer.
Right.
Many of which who are parents who really want their kids well educated. So there are these tears that. I don't know where we have a conversation like, what do people think the town of Berlin is doing right now that we could do less of? Because we hear all the people who want, more hours at the transfer station, more hours at the library, faster police response, faster fire responses, the plowing happening faster during snowstorms. You hear those, but you don't hear the people who are like, I think the town is spending money on X that it really shouldn't be spending on. And sadly, when I go through the budget, there's
I was going to say,
There's not anything to chop.
there's not a lot of those out there, but
and I
it'd be
think
interesting
about
to
those
figure that out.
things, and if I were to come across something like that, I'd go, maybe those resources could be better allocated
Right.
to X, and that's always something that's on my mind. But I certainly don't get complaints about us having too much service, or spending too much in the wrong areas, and you can always be doing more, right?
Right.
I mean, that's
Right, and more costs money.
correct.
How much should we get into social services instead of relying on social services done by many of the organizations that are out there?
Sure.
Now, we're doing it because there's gaps in those organizations.
And our
but-
demographics.
Yep. But it's as much for the people watching, the stuff we do costs money. I'm always floored the number of people who are like, I think the fire department should be here faster, and why are my taxes too high? And your taxes are too high because people want the fire department there faster. That costs money. We don't have a printing press here.
yeah.
At least if we have one, don't say it in front of the chief.
Or let me know.
My other two items
I'd
are going
like
to be
to
for
know.
later in the meeting.
Okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
right.
I'm all set.
The River Bridge Agreement, number 4.
Yes.
Where are we? What's the holdup? Do we need a joint meeting? Move this along.
No, we're still moving on it. We are working on the bridge piece of it right now, which is really the last part that we have to deal with. And I actually had reached out to them today. We're trying to get on the same page in terms of cost estimates, and that's been a bit of a challenge, but I think we've cleared up where the divisions lie and what needs to happen in order for us to get on the same page.
Did you hear from them today?
I did not hear back yet, no.
Oh, I don't think I got an email.
Put you on the email. Am I having something weird going on today with my
I don't
phone?
know.
I'll double check.
I did see some emails from you today, but they weren't about that.
Okay,
The BMS lease agreement,
yes.
who has it? Where is it? Time-ish, frame period to complete?
I have it, and I am working on it. I was hoping this would be a quiet week, and I'd be able to get the changes we got back from town council incorporated. And there was, believe it or not, there were a lot of questions, comments back and forth with town council. The agreement wasn't a ready-to-go agreement, and I don't want to send something back to the schools that, first of all, Carol and Nancy haven't looked at it, so I want to make sure that we're sealing everything up on our end before I send it over there.
You don't want
So-
to sign off on something unless it's okay with us.
Yeah, and the other thing is with the change in town council too, I said, I've got these questions, and then they had other questions that hadn't been addressed by the other attorneys, so I wanted to make sure that we touched it all. So my hope is to get all that wrapped up this week and get it over to the schools.
The Brown Barn, appreciate you sending those costs through. Was there anything in there about moving the electricity out of that barn? Because either I read it quickly or I didn't see it or it wasn't included. Because that needs to be part of it, just taking it down and hauling it away. There's a big old electric light out of there that needs to be taken into consideration for that money.
And potentially a pole, because I think there's a pole that only feeds that building,
I
and
think so,
Okay.
if the building is
Let's
gone, the
look at
pole
that.
can go to.
correct. Yep.
But the
I
pole
think
should
that
go.
pole does the light over the pond.
Right.
And then you'd have to have the whole discussion about, is that going to be a working light? Who can turn it on, who can turn it off, et cetera, neighbors, blah.
Well, it's on like if somebody's out there at night, I think, isn't it?
I don't think it's been
It's
on.
for the
I-
pond,
I
isn't
don't
it?
think it's
I
been
don't
on
know.
for a while.
I don't know who turns it on or off. I don't know that sort of stuff.
Actually, I think when they built the court, they knocked that pole down.
Did they?
Yeah, 'cause I know there was talks about putting lights on those courts.
Mm.
Like the new LED lights that just like shine down.
Shine on the court and not-
light the court, yeah.
So we just need to find out what the status is of the electricity.
That's in the, yep, that's in the Brown building. And to
Right.
make sure that that's included in whatever
Yep.
fundage and the poll, as Scott was talking about. So this Wednesday is a half a day. Is that PTO time too? Like Friday is PTO?
So, no, the plan was to do a 2:00 dismissal, which we had done last year, so people could go home and get started on Thanksgiving. So we didn't make people use PTO for it last year, so I just kept it consistent with how it was.
Right.
But Friday, yes.
Okay.
It
So-
just turned out everybody happens to be taking PTO on Friday, so I figured, well, I don't want people to come in and not be able to do anything, so we just closed the whole thing down.
So on the shelf for the agendas, I see 12:4, but I didn't see anything for next Monday. Did I sleep through like a meeting that we're skipping next Monday, or is it just not a shelf?
Is
We
it
did not have a meeting scheduled for next Monday.
Right.
So we just had the 3, I think we were at 3 a month. So according to the big schedule that was mapped out for the year, which I can't see from here because it's over there.
Well, I think there's one here in front of us.
Can you
All right.
check, Chris, on that one? I don't believe there was one scheduled for,
Next Monday.
No, 6, 13, and 20.
So
All
the
right.
next one,
so the 4th would be
Is
the
the
next
4th.
one.
Yep.
All right. So, in your comments, you put, that the budgets are gonna be flat. Trying to find your exact wording.
Level
Here.
funded.
Level
level
funded. So who's telling the school?
well,
We told the school
I did get an
2.5%.
email today
Okay,
with
you
the
told them that.
notification of a
and-
meeting
Right.
for Berlin-Boylston, and they will be talking about the response to our letter to them.
So we did send them that letter
I saw.
that we discussed. I can't control
I know.
overall what they do for their budget. They are allowed to present their own budget. I think we made the case strongly for the challenges we faced last year and for trying to reduce that percentage as much as possible. They have never been really in that 2.5% range. You're talking before COVID, you're more in like the 4 to 5% range, but where we were at with 19% is unprecedented. So I would like to see it if we could get back into, the 3 to 5% range. That would be a more appropriate level for us to be at.
And then last question, I know we had talked about the number of personnel that's needed throughout the offices here to help. So if we're staying level funded, how do we bring in more people?
So that is a supplemental funding request. So
Okay.
departments can put in what's called a supplemental funding request for anything over and above budget. And that is something we would work with the FinCom and ultimately bring to the select board as well and look at what we have funding for and try to work some of those needs in. But basically, you're building your basic budget level except for contractual increases, vendor increases, those types of things. And so we pull out the additional funding requests that are above and beyond.
So does that include like all the additional market increases for those 7 or so employees that you shared with us?
So those are usually done up front. Those did get approved by personnel and the select board. So those get included already because they have gone through the approval process. This would be like if you're adding a new position or you're adding hours or you have an expense that's a new expense.
Okay.
What incentive does the school board have to curb their spending?
They would have to go to an override.
Well, town meeting sets the
Mhm.
budget.
Right, but what incentive do they have to curb their budget? They
They-
can present whatever they want to present, right?
They can, and town meeting can vote on whatever dollar amount they want to vote on.
Mhm.
So they don't have, but they don't have any incentive to keep it down.
That- I think we learned this last year, they have a great incentive to put it down, because if they put a budget together
Mhm.
that they don't think is going to pass town meeting, it won't pass town meeting.
Right.
I mean, it could have been this last town meeting, a select board and FinCom with one number and the school board on another number, and however it got voted at town meeting would be at town meeting.
And a lengthy cumbersome process thereafter if Boylston and Berlin were different and you're talking about district meetings and
Yep.
it becomes complicated when there isn't agreement. So that is the incentive to reach agreement.
And
We shall
school
see.
board is run by a group of elected officials that are up for election, and so it could be that during elections, people ask questions about what they feel about that.
All right. Are we moving on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're moving on to old business. And I put the update on the Boston Post-Cane presentation, and I didn't know, Peg, if you wanted to
Mhm.
read the little blurb in our,
Well, I didn't have it up, but just.
well, you can just fill us in then.
Yeah, but I mean, just as a summary, so it was a nice opportunity to meet Mrs. Romelli. Her son was there, one of her daughters was there, her brother and his wife were there. I think the big part of it was just being able to sit and spend some time with them and have a chat, because they don't really attend town meetings, so to find out kind of like what was going on. When I brought the fully signed certificate back this past Thursday, I knocked on the door, and both her daughter Denise and Mrs. Romelli were quite thrilled and surprised that I made the trip back to give them that, to which I responded that it would not have been right to just drop it in the mail to you. I presented this to you last week, so it was only fair. So we did good things, I did good things in meeting with them, and just, I was probably there about a half hour, 45 minutes, which is the way that it was with Mrs. Crackart, and spent some time with her, and posthumously to Mr. Lang's family, when I presented it at his house. So it's a good thing,
Oh, we
it's a good
appreciate
tradition.
it. We appreciate you doing that, and I wished I could have come, but
Yeah. You know
I
what,
didn't want to
and it's-
infect anybody.
You know, Dee's write-up was sweet. It was her son that was able to present me with the photo of Mr. and Mrs. Romelli as Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus for Hudson all those years ago. So it was just nice to have that personal touch, and there were quite a few comments from folks in town, you know, congratulations, thank you for doing this. And Mrs. Romelli basically told me that she plans on living till 100, so that's about 7 more years, so we won't be presenting it again to anybody for a while. You gotta love the woman. She was a spitfire. But no, it was as I said, that's one of the fun things to do that this position allows.
Yep.
Is to do that, so.
Well, we thank you for doing that.
Sure thing.
Okay. New business. We've got the TGI Fridays change of manager application for the liquor license.
Okay, so we did run this through all of the internal processes that we have to do on our end, including the background check, and everything is clear to move forward with the change of manager.
Okay.
I'm fine with the change of manager. I'll make a motion that we approve, acknowledge the change of manager at TGI Fridays.
Second it.
Okay. If nothing else to be said, then we'll take a vote. All in favor? Say
Aye.
aye.
Aye, great.
You didn't say aye. Did you say aye?
I think I
No,
swatted a
not you, I
fly.
think her.
I
No,
know.
I think
Oh,
I
you
was
swatted
swatting
a
a
fly.
fly, but I said aye.
I'm swatting
Oh.
them too.
I know. All righty. And Kristen, you tell me that we're going to pass over the ambulance collection policy at this point?
Yep, there are some additional changes that we need to make with the chief and with the accountant, and we will bring that back to you soon.
Could you highlight what the changes were? Because that was like my question for you over here on the side is, I don't know what changed. And
Sure. It's
I think
overhauled.
I was going to say, I think it's
It's
a
the flag.
substantial, because it used to actually have the select board approve the changes, and so it was a process of bringing
Yeah.
it to us. I think this is sort of taking it out of our hands, mostly because all we ever do is approve it, because we're not allowed to see
Correct.
any of the details behind it anyway.
Yep.
And sort of gives the, if I understand it, and you might change the wording, but the conditions upon which we agree that they're
Mhm.
allowed
Okay.
to forgive it.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. So it's basically making it an internal process for privacy and HIPAA reasons, and being able to define the reasons that you would do any kind of a waiver. It does go sometimes beyond a financial hardship if there's a death, if it's uncollectible for a specific purpose, the person doesn't have the financial means, meaning literally you cannot collect those funds. So there's a number of reasons that it outlines that go beyond, because before it was just a financial hardship waiver, and that kind of limits you in terms of those other reasons. And it basically really tried to outline a clear process of not only how we waive things, but how we collect and review monthly and on a regular basis to make sure that we're billing and getting in and staying on top of how much we bill and receive, so that we have to waive the minimum number of accounts possible.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just hoping for a comparison. You know, usually you have your track changes on in the corner so that you can see scratch, 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 now says, adding in. So that's what unless I did this,
I gotcha.
I wasn't seeing wants to be.
It's
Or
pretty
is wants to be.
significantly different, which is the only reason I didn't do that.
Okay.
I pulled up one that Margaret had started to work on in 2020. June had started to work on it as well, and it's very different from the one that was passed back in 2018. So,
Then can we just call it new?
the standing. I think it's probably best to
Just call
go
it
forward
new.
with it as a new one.
Yep.
Because it's more comprehensive as well.
Okay. Thanks.
If you're doing some tweaks, I didn't see
Yep.
on it, I'd love that when something gets forgiven, that like the total, the date range, and the number of them gets included along the TA report. I don't think it needs its own agenda item, but I'd love to say we forgive 15, and they're from April 2018 to June 2018 for a total of $12,000.
An amount in the TA report.
Yep.
I can do that.
Yep.
Sure.
Just lets us acknowledge that it happened, and as you point out, there's a lot of good reasons for it to happen.
No problem.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the use of town sign policy.
Okay, this one is really tough, and I worked on this for a long time because we have a signboard, as everybody knows, the Blinky sign.
The blinky sign.
In town. I just called it signboard because perhaps someday it could be a message board in the, on the, in the center. The problem is you really have to define what the purpose is for the sign, and typically municipal resources are supposed to be used for municipal purposes, and that's the guidance that you get from the Inspector General's office. So I tried to take a little bit of information from their documents that they publish, and also give some examples of what allowable uses would be, which would be traffic information like road closures and detours, any type of Berlin government or school-sponsored events, including those sponsored by Berlin boards or committees. So for example, if Recreation was sponsoring an event, that would qualify. And also any types of announcements like town meeting, election information, building closures, those types of things. They're really not supposed to be used for non-municipal messaging. And the problem is when you get into allowing things to go beyond governmental messaging, it gets very dicey between what's allowable and what's not allowable, because you can't say, well, it can only be nonprofits. And you can't say, well, that business can do it, but that business can't. And you can't say, well, it can't be churches. So it really becomes very, very dicey, and the simplest way is to make it all or nothing. And I recognize that there's been a lot of confusion in the past about how this has been done, and I have been getting contacted by people who say, hey, can we put this on the sign? Well, that's not sponsored by the town, and it's the town sign, so no. And there are people that aren't happy with that, and I get it. I just think the most important thing for us to do is really define that that should be for a, public use. Now, that's not to say that they can't use other means for advertising, government use, I'm sorry, I said public. But, that they can't use other means for advertising, whether it be, on their property or other businesses in town or those kinds of methods. But we have to make sure, as stewards of public funds especially, that we're not cherry picking who we represent and who we don't. Because we could say, well, we let that business do it, and then this other business comes forward and says, well, hey, nobody ever let me do it. And so that's where the concern really lies. So I tried to put together a really simple policy that makes it clear what would be allowable and not.
Does town board sign include the potential sign at BMS? Because is that on town property or school property?
I
Well,
believe it would, because
it'd be-
when they were talking about it at planning board, they were talking about if there was a sign that they replaced the Blinky sign, but still had something in the center of town, and then a sign at the school.
Right. The lease, though, gives the school jurisdiction over those
Okay.
items that are associated with their property, so we wouldn't control their messaging.
I'm
Like
just
this,
thinking,
under this policy.
right, I'm just thinking that someone will have an issue with some message going up thinking that's school-owned property. No, it's town-owned property, so,
Well, it's been that way
It's going
forever,
to
though.
be town-owned property, but the lease will outline
Yeah.
that they have control over messaging on the.
Yep.
Correct, and that's a good point to make sure that that's in there.
mhm.
I mean, for me, this policy is all the lines of, we just can't have nice things. That because someone out there, and I get it, because I played around with trying to find wording that would work,
I
like
know.
town-based nonprofits and organizations, but then, someone does a town-based organization that is, we hate these type of people, and then officially that qualifies,
with-
just because
yep.
I don't potentially like their message, or,
Mm-hmm.
the political action committee that supports,
Mm-hmm.
this person, and so that's a non-profit. It's like, no, you're right, you can't, because you can't do judgment to say, boy, Village Fair would be great to put on the sign, but, this other fair we can't because it's
Right,
a
or-
weird group. And I
Or
get
or a
that, so.
church event, or a
Correct.
business
Right.
event,
Yep.
sponsored event. And I will tell you, I ran into an issue, political signs that people put in like right-of-ways
Oh, yeah.
or little median strips or stuff like that. You can't ban political signs on town-owned property unless you have a bylaw that bans all
All signs.
signs
Yep.
on town-owned property, meaning businesses, fairs, events, everything. So, I went through this in my former community, it became a real issue because people were putting political signs. There's a lot of little traffic islands and little grassy areas, and neighbors were complaining in residential neighborhoods and saying, we don't want these signs. And the highway department used to go around and just pull them out.
Yeah.
And then people complained they were going to file a civil rights suit.
Well, we had that issue several years ago where signs were disappearing and highway would take them down to mow, but
And then
perhaps
they
forget
didn't
to put them
perhaps
back up.
didn't go
And
back.
But
Yeah.
nobody's taking down the village craft fair sign.
Right.
Or the, something about Cordelia's Farm, or whatever it is,
Right.
It's just, that's where you get into issues.
because we can't have nice things.
Because we can't, nice.
There you
Um,
Because
go.
we are bland, boring, and
Can we
very
get a T-shirt
regimented.
with that, Scott? Just saying hashtag, because we can't have nice things?
There's a lot of rules, not just at town level, out there that just, because you can't have nice, you can't do
Yeah.
judgments anymore. The only other thing is, I'm wondering if this is too narrow, that this looks like a great policy of potential uses for non-emergency code red. These would be the same things that could, I wouldn't
Sure.
do it for each one of them, but if I was looking at things that I thought the non-emergency code red could be used for, there's probably a better term for it than the non-emergency side of it. But these are the type of things that
Yeah.
might,
It
a revert-
aligns.
Right, it aligns. Like, boy, everyone in town just know this bridge is now closed, or stuff. And it's weird because I don't think as a town have hardly ever used it for anything but emergency stuff. And my work number is somehow publicized on the code red for a different town that I won't name. But if I can go 3 days without getting something on it, it's a long time, and I would hate to think that we would ever use it for a ton of these things, but, I think South Street Bridge being closed might have been a good use for it. I think town meetings and town elections would be a good use for it.
Did you not get the one for South Street Bridge being
No.
closed?
I probably did, actually, you're right. I just got so much because I got an email on it too. I might
I
have
didn't.
gotten it, yeah.
I got 3 of them.
We did a reverse 911
Yeah.
for South Street Bridge.
See,
Yeah.
I probably, if I look at my phone right now, I'd find it on there.
Oh, okay. No, because now I'm just like,
No, no.
I was worried I did something wrong.
Well, I mean, it's like this, if we were constantly putting things out,
Right,
You
people
wouldn't see
stop
them
watching,
anymore.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
people aren't gonna get the message
Yep.
when we put it, like, when we put out a message, it's legit.
Right.
Right,
We don't
It's
want it to
important.
be
It's important.
just out of
Correct.
convenience, like, oh, here goes the town again.
right.
You know, it's, okay, here's the town, what do they have to say?
Right.
That's what we want people to respond.
And think that you could
Right.
use it like once a month at most, and so is this event worthy of it to do it? I wouldn't do it like, we're plowing, because anyone who's watching the weather would know that
Snowing.
people know it's plowing, although that's one of the ones I get, is like, we've started plowing, we're still plowing, the storm is still going, it's like, okay, I get it, I can look out my window, it's.
The only thing we've ever done related to that is if there's and you don't have a winter storm a parking ban.
I
So,
mean, we have winter parking, but that's, hasn't changed.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
if there was something like
Yeah.
that where it went into effect on a certain date,
So-
we wanted to let people know.
I mean, I like it as is. I think bullet points sort of 1 and 3 are the ones I'd most think of for a reverse 911, not as much an event. I don't know if
Right.
coffee talk might qualify, because again, I'd be a word that gets used too often, but
Yeah.
town meeting, town elections, significant traffic stuff.
Coffee talk is a
I-
municipal thing, though.
I know it is, well, it is. It would qualify as the blinky sign, just whether or not I would use it for,
The only reason
Oh,
I
right,
didn't
right.
open it up
Right.
to all media
right,
is because then we would have to also get into Facebook and website, and I wanted to start
Right.
here because
Right.
those present their
Yep.
own unique
Yep.
challenges.
Yeah.
But we were having an immediate issue with the signboard,
Yep.
so I wanted to make sure we addressed that. And, I'm certainly not trying to be the person who says we don't want to advertise your event. But we really
but you are going to be the
shouldn't.
person who tells them that you're not going to advertise.
It's,
that.
and that's my job, and that's why I figured, put it on me. Don't have to put it on
Yep.
you all, and I will even tell
Yep.
Fred, and it's, me or a designee, so that it
Right.
doesn't have to be Fred's call,
Right.
it's,
Yep.
it's big
Well,
bad
once he gets a hold of this policy, after we approve
It's gonna
it,
be
though,
easier for
it'll be a
Fred.
little easier for
Right.
him.
Right, because now it's been a judgment call of like.
Right.
hey,
Right.
what-
Which gets us in the trouble that we've had.
What
so.
about the whiteboard in the center of town by the garden? Is that a town-owned board or is that a private board? Is that a Berlin Lions board?
No, it's a Berlin Lions
So-
board.
So it's not.
Lions Club on it. We have no say,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
They can publicize whatever they want.
So why is the Facebook moderator allowed to make a judgment call and the government isn't?
What do you mean?
Well, these groups are moderated by Facebook volunteers,
Mhm.
Right.
and we can decide what goes and what doesn't. Why can't you?
It's, we're just deciding
That's
right now.
kind-
We're about to vote on a policy on what allows us to do and not to do.
Right.
Permitting anything within certain guidelines and having a moderator, one of you or Kristen.
Yeah, I don't think the current policy is not Facebook. It's a signboard policy, and I
Right.
think the policy is fine.
Right, and it's,
Right.
the other thing is it's a
And-
use of a town-purchased resource.
Right.
It's not just
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
social media.
Although, obviously, I think there could be tweaks here and there. I am fine with this policy as it's written. I have no reason to hold it up.
Me too.
Do we need to add anything about the BMS lease?
I'm gonna make sure that there is something in the BMS lease about that
About
they,
the sign.
Okay.
the message board is theirs.
All right.
Well, but that might deserve a discussion. I mean, if it's,
But if it's their
if
land.
it's municipal, well, it's
our
not their land.
It's our
Their
land.
Well, I'm sorry.
their
It's
land
town
and
land.
leasing
It's
for-
our land, but when they're a lessee, they're allowed to do their
Right.
own messaging. And I went through this
Yeah.
too with, and that would be up to them to create a policy for their
Right.
sign.
I don't think they're going to stray from anything that has to do with school.
Right.
Whether it's meetings,
Right.
book fairs.
They have a lot of policies too that they do.
They do have a lot of policies. I mean, I don't think they're going to stray
Yeah.
from that, but I do think that, you could share this guideline with them.
Sure, I can certainly.
I was
do
also
that.
hoping that maybe if we're going to vote to approve this, that we could share it with planning board so they
Yeah.
have an idea of what we're doing, because they're the ones talking about these two possible signs.
The LED signs, yeah. And we actually, when we met with them, they were talking about actually putting in the bylaw that it's to be used for municipal and school messaging only, so they were on the same page as we
Right.
as we are here.
That's why I thought maybe it'd be good to share it with them.
Definitely.
You know, the town of Hudson also does like time and temperature on those
Correct.
too, which are not officially government things, but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those are relatively, like, not associated with
I
anyone
know,
in particular.
I know,
though.
right.
God.
And they don't even say like time and temperature brought to you by, so
Right,
they're
right.
just,
Mother Nature.
yep.
So do I hear a motion?
I,
or-
I would
You
move
did.
that we approve the town sign policy as written.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Sure.
Okay. Then we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And moving on to the ARPA projects.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to do two things here. I wanted to take a minute to go over some of the conditionally approved items that the board worked on back in May when we needed to appropriate our funding for fear of losing said funding, and also talk specifically about the Brown Barn. So the first thing I thought I would do is just give some brief updates on where we're at with all of these projects for your benefit as well as the audience. Obviously, the social services position, the last year of funding is FY24. So if we want to continue with that half-time social services position, it does need to go into the 25 budget unless we were to reallocate or repurpose ARPA funds from something else that potentially may have funding left over, but that's kind of an iffy, an iffy thing. The special audit we did is done. The gerontology study, which was the community survey that we did, was about aging in Berlin, is complete. We did a file cleanup, which is complete. There's a little bit of funding left over in there from what was appropriated, little $520. The air handler replacement came in a little bit over the cost. So there was a $750. Hold on, that looks weird to me actually.
Well, so what you saved on one, you're spending on another one.
Yeah, but I need
a little
to
less.
check that because I'm not sure where that 750 is. I hope that's not a typo. So let me just check on that and see what that is. Because we also had regular article funding for that air handler, and then we were covering the overage with ARPA. So I'm just going to check on where that 750 came because the spreadsheet goes way out and has 14 sheets attached to it. The weatherization Fred has been working on. He's been in communication, in fact, as recently as a few days ago, back and forth with the company that's supposed to be coming out to fix it. And I think he's been getting a little bit of a runaround from them. So he's been coming down a little bit harder on them, trying to get that squared away. Road engineering, we spent $4,500 on the Complete Streets grant application, and what we needed to put that in, that was for the sidewalks and pedestrian access downtown, down around Carter, and connecting to Bullard Library, everywhere in that area. Recreation program funding, they ended up going with a Boston College group that came in this summer and ran clinics directly, and parents paid Boston College directly, so that funding is there. I actually will check in with Julie and see if they have any plans to utilize that funding in the upcoming summer. Rec program funding. The recreation court reconstruction came in actually a little bit under the $30,000 that was appropriated, so we do have a little less than $2,000 left over on the rec court project. The third floor renovation obviously is on hold. We spent the $11,500 to do the architectural plans and cost estimate, but clearly with a cost of 1.7 or 1.8, that's not something we can do right now. Digitization of documents. I know Amy has been working in the accounting office at listening to some different demos. They make you watch demos before they'll give you quotes, which is really fun. I went through this when we tried to do rec software. So they want to make sure it meets your needs before, they tell you it's $5 million. So,
I generally have vendors at least bring ballparks, because I also don't want to go through a full demo and have them tell me it's $1 million when I have 5,000 in my budget.
right.
You
What,
know.
it's gonna be, this is the thing, it's gonna be more than 5
Yeah,
grand.
I-
So that's something we're gonna need
done
to
some of these.
reassess, but until I have a hard
Yep,
quote,
yep.
it's hard to say. Website update, Stephanie has been working on getting acclimated and planning on that, so I will touch base with her too to see where she's at there. Playground equipment at South Commons. They have applied for CPA funding to do something a bit bigger. They don't want to address just the playground equipment, but they want to address the paving and ADA accessibility. And I think it makes sense to take a comprehensive approach to that site rather than just buy equipment and put it down. So there's a request they put in. I want to say it's 100,000 in CPA funding to do the rest of the playground, but I can't remember the number off the top of my head. So that will move concurrently with the CPA process, and I'll be tracking that to see where that goes. The South Commons parking and barn demo, you actually have 2 quotes in your packet or your Google file for barn demo. I actually requested 3 and requested a number of parking quotes, came up short on parking, but came up with a couple of quotes for the demo. As Peg mentioned, we need to look at the electrical and see where we're at. But one of the quotes is, I believe, 26 on the Brown Barn demo. And that is
Well,
gentleman.
Yeah, 135.8 plus 1,600, so, peg math, oh dear God, 4. That's like 37,
Yeah.
4.
So
Smith was that one.
Yep, and then Tyler Favreau was 23,688. Knew there was a 6 in there somewhere. So that's the cost to demo the barn, excavate and dispose of the materials, and restore the area to grass, loam, and seed as needed. Obviously, I need to check in on the electrical on that, but that comes in far below the 50 grand. Tyler also gave me paving costs right now, which he said for asphalt is running about $5. I did the math out. Now, of course, I can't find the sheet that I did it on. It came out for that parking area that is existing, which would do about 20 to 30 cars, would be somewhere in the ballpark of $66,000. So we did put in another $50,000 request through capital, which would actually, if we paired that up with this project, be sufficient to fund both, depending on, as you said, the electrical. So I would probably, I was kind of hoping to get the barn demo done, but I think it may make more sense to, double check, unless you're comfortable moving forward with this piece of it, provided we work out the electrical component of it. So I don't know what the board feels about that.
What's your pleasure?
He's like, I can get it done before Christmas.
Really?
There's nothing in the building, right?
Fred's been moving everything out.
Right.
Critters.
And this just takes down the building, but doesn't remove the metal storage container that's there.
This is just the brown
Right,
barn.
Brown barn.
right.
So it depends on how quickly we want to move on this. We
Right.
can also wait till the
Where's the metal
spring.
container?
Last one I was by, there was a metal container that was it contained some of the bleachers, the wooden bleachers that needed to go away at some point.
I
Maybe
think
it's not
those
so-
are
Right down the
controlled by
end?
rec, aren't
Oh,
they?
yeah, I know.
I think they need to be disposed of.
Well, there's a cost for that.
Right.
Right.
But even
Yeah, I went to
even
that
if there is a metal storage container there, it would be a little bit of money, but it could be potentially that storage can be moved to something that's just not sitting in the middle of a field somewhere, so.
Yeah, and I can find out about that storage container and who owns it. I don't know if that's ours or if
It
it's
is.
Rex, if it's highways or it's Rex, rather. I didn't mean
Right.
ours, but.
Right,
Probably the
ours
town's.
is some town committee, it is not owned by
Correct.
an outside of town of Berlin group, but you're right. It might be rec, it might be highway, it might be select board, who knows? Maybe it's owned by historical and it's full of stuff.
Bad.
It is not, it's not at all.
Well, I mean, there's a part of me, to take the building down would be nice, to have additional parking would be nice, especially if it's a cold winter and people like to go and skate on the pond and do things like that, but there's also a part of me that says this is going to be a really tight financial year. is there an opportunity to shift that money somewhere else that we truly may need it?
Well, but if we get rid of the barn, that's one less building we have to have insurance on.
There you go.
That's not a large
There's a
dollar amount,
savings.
but that,
Burn the barn down, we won't have to pay to get rid of. Mm-hmm, yeah.
He woke up.
Can we wait till you get the electrical costs and timing? Because,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that's
Well, I
great that
mean,
they may say
do
they're
you
ready
wanna
to go
wait?
by winter, and then whoever owns that pole says, hey, how's May?
really, no, I don't want to wait, but I think it might be prudent to wait. I think what is prudent and what I want might be in conflict with each other.
Yeah.
I think waiting until our meeting on the 4th, it means it might not come down until January, it means it might not be fully graded and seeded till spring is, I think, fine.
Oh, yeah, I'm not in
Yeah,
any
'cause you
hurry. I
can't-
just want to make the decision, I
Yeah,
think.
I think that I'm fine with it coming down. I'd like to make sure the electrical doesn't add a bunch more. I'd like to look a little bit more about if should we add some money to make sure if there
Maybe.
is a large metal container there that it can get moved somewhere else.
I mean, there's nothing really, nothing's gonna grow now, so, why would you
Right.
seed it now? You'd wait until the spring, so.
The
Right.
question is just certainly based on the cost,
Right.
is,
Right.
confirmation we want to do
But-
it, and then timing,
I think the cost is fine. I think the combination, assuming something passes at town meeting, which is never a given, especially since we have to get other approvals prior to town meeting even, that I think getting that paid for a 20 to 30 paved
Spots.
parking spot that would have a couple of handicap spots near the pickleball courts would make that place way more usable and accessible to way more town residents. And so I still think it's a project that I am very much in favor of moving forward.
So which one, the Tyler Favreau quote or the M.E. Smith quote? You wanna go with the higher one, and,
I'm always fine with a lower bid.
I know.
I think it was a building I was living in I would worry about more, but like, make it go away, like.
Well, it may make a difference when you find out about the electricity,
right,
too.
yeah.
Which is why part of me is wanting to also get that electrical piece
Yep,
and
yep.
bring you a comprehensive quote, hopefully on the 4th.
Yep.
and, permits, I know they may be negligible, but, you know.
Oh, no, we will.
Well, I know, but his line, there was a line that says permits, and it's blank, and I didn't see one on the other one for permits, so I just
Okay.
want to make sure that it is
Right.
an all-inclusive
Yep.
cost, and it's not, we think it's $10, and surprise, surprise, it's 25.
I don't think the replacement parking lot has to be the exact size and shape of the current one. I think figure out what we think is a good size for a parking lot. I think understanding where rec wants to go, would like to go with some of that spaces to make sure that we're building something that actually
Yep.
complements what they're doing. I think we have the time for that, because I think even if we tear down the barn this fall, we're not gonna get the money till town meeting, it'll be next fall before something happens there. We can really make sure that's coordinated well with rec.
Yep.
Is it possible the fire chief should be contacted to see if it could be used as a training fire?
It was floated to him last time he was here, I can't remember his
Yeah,
response.
I
I think he was
that they're
saying no.
inter- Right, right.
Yeah, just because of proximity to other houses and
It's just
school
pretty
and,
so involved, too.
Yeah.
Right, because of the age of it and a water supply right there, that any water off of it's gonna run into the pond, which we'd probably not want to have happen either.
correct. And there's no conservation issue, they've been contacted to talk about this? I
Oh,
don't,
they will be.
All right.
Don't you worry.
Um,
well, I
No,
just,
we would go through
I
the
just
whole
want to make
department
sure, I
review
just want to make
process.
sure,
Right.
so we don't have issues like we did with the tennis courts going out a wee bit too far and filtering into the pond. That's-
Agreed. No, and I
Check,
say that
check, check,
emphatically
check.
because I don't want that to happen again. So,
When I-
Again, we've started the conversation a while ago, but you're right, there's not been any formal, like Historic hasn't had a formal vote
Yep.
either. They probably should be sort of at least notified to ask if they, because officially it's a building that's probably more than 50 years old, and
And here's a
I get
silly
it.
question, ZBA or planning need to be involved? What is that land zoned for? Any issues with parking spots? That's why I'm saying we need a comprehensive checklist that says conservation said okay, planning okay, ZBA, fire, police, check,
but
check,
before you
check,
do
boom.
parking, definitely. For demo, I don't know that you'd be asking anybody but historical, for, if you want to vote of historical. I know you've spoken with historical and the year
And
of
how
the
do
building.
they feel about it?
I've spoken to them only as individuals. It's
Yeah.
not been a discussion in any formal meeting.
Okay.
And the people I talked to, no one had any strong objections at the moment. They have some warm and fuzzies for it, but
Right.
recognize that it's not as old as it looks. It was built in an older style, but it's not as old as the building looks, and it's, structurally not in great shape, and
Well, then you have an
I
opportunity.
personally think it's an eyesore on that space. I think you
I
have a
do
much
too.
beautiful
Yeah.
view of South Common if that building wasn't there.
Well,
Yeah.
then you have an opportunity for Marty Miller to come through, snap little photos
Yeah.
of it. Somebody takes a nice little write-up and it gets stuck on the corner.
Right, I think our vote to proceed is the beginning of a process, not the end of a
I was
process.
just, you took the
Right.
words out
Yep.
right out of my mouth. Exactly. This is just to make sure pricing-wise, we're comfortable with it, and this is something we actually want to move forward with.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So we'll come back on the 4th with some more information.
Okay,
But
so-
you're ultimately going to need votes to lower the appropriation down to the actual when a project has been completed so that we get a better sense of what might be
Mhm.
available, or do you just do that naturally? I don't know if a vote is needed to say we're not going to spend money on a project that's already completed.
I've sort of adjusted, so what I've done with social services is we had the appropriation, we had the actual expenditure. I've kind of just adjusted them, but we could do it through an official vote. Ultimately, the state just wants to see that we have appropriated the funding in full. I think there's an understanding that there could be some movement between that funds, but not that we're just sitting on $900,000.
Right.
I don't know what we're
Right.
going to do with it. So.
We get enough documents to.
Right.
This is literally a 15 spreadsheet.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
project has its own
Yeah.
page on this one. So, and we have spent $198,000 so far. So we only have $770,000 to go. Getting there.
Well,
Right.
it's earmarked.
Well, it is earmarked, and I think some of the larger projects that are not proceeding at a decent pace, we might take some of it out to put the social services in for another 20.5 hours in fiscal year '25.
That's an option as well. I mean, it's open for discussion, and we haven't talked about it recently, which is one of the reasons I wanted to put it on the agenda.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We can buy a cruiser too.
You can. Saying.
Electric.
No. The cruisers just went up $7,600,
Yep.
but they do have a 2023 gray one in the lot for $40,000 or $40,300.
Isn't that what public safety mitigation is for?
24s are going up to $47,655.
With nothing in it.
Electric cars will not happen for us unless you don't want us doing any traffic enforcement. Radar units do not work in electric cars. And none of the
Really?
vendors are offering solutions. And
Right.
they have now dropped the 12-volt system down to 35 amps, and it takes 40 amps to run a light bar.
No kidding.
So we're running into a lot of snafus.
Long extension cords
Right.
throughout the town?
Yeah.
Love to know. So why won't a radar gun work in an electric car?
There's magnetic interference.
Wow.
They're
Didn't know
fine.
that.
Does it mean they can't get the speed of electric cars that go by them?
They should communicate with each other.
Because we like that then, right?
Really?
Nice try.
Yeah, they're doing 2 builds right now. They're doing 2 builds right now for the state police, and they're
Okay.
having a heck of a time.
We'll let the state police have the first round of problems, and then we'll do pedal power.
Flintstone cars. Mm-hmm.
Doing an electric pickup truck and an electric Mustang.
All
They're
right.
gonna be showpieces.
I didn't see the last item in our folder.
I put the Brown Barn and the parking on 12-4 in
Okay,
my
good.
notes
Yep,
here.
Good.
Okay.
Anything else
No, they tried
on that,
to
on
work it, but it
ARPA?
didn't work.
We good?
Well, do we want to talk a little bit more, now that you've seen everything and we've given an update, do we want to talk about reallocating? I don't know that we're there yet,
No,
honestly,
I
about
think-
reallocating
We'll talk
funding.
about it
Yeah.
at the next,
Yeah.
the 4th,
Okay,
and we could talk about it then.
sure.
Yep.
So we're moving on to voting on the Board of Assessors, the Board of Health, and senior work-off workers designated as special municipal employees.
This sounds a whole lot more complicated than it is. This is very common, especially in smaller communities. It's under the state conflict of interest law. You can't have people hold multiple positions without those positions being declared as quote-unquote special municipal employees. The Board of Selectmen, Select Board, has to take a vote to declare these positions as quote-unquote special municipal employees. It's the position, not the person, So it carries with that position indefinitely unless you revoke it. There is no cost or to it or liability. It's basically to fulfill the statutory requirements under the conflict of interest law. So the reason this specifically came up is that you have current members of the Board of Assessors and Board of Health that are or are interested in being senior work-off workers. So typically with special municipal employees, you have to designate both of those positions as SMEs. And I would argue that a lot of our volunteers are of the age where senior work-off may also work for them as well, and I wouldn't see any reason to preclude them from doing that. There was a call made to ethics. Ethics will actually only generally speak with the person who has a question about their position, but one of the individuals who did reach out to ethics wanting to hold both of these positions, they said, well, is your board position designated as the senior work-off position designated? We went back through our records and unfortunately do not have very good older records. I checked with Eloise, she didn't have it. Typically the way I've always done it is you keep a running list and you file it with the town clerk, so when you've taken the vote you always have it on file. And we just could not find that those positions had been designated. There is one person on one of these boards that has been doing senior work-off since July. Unbeknownst to them that there was a potential conflict. So if you were to take this vote, I would ask that you make it retroactive to July 1.
Does the policy and procedure need to be rewritten to include that so that we don't fall, a year from now, we don't fall into the same problem with somebody working for another committee department in town? And
Always on a case-by-case basis, unfortunately. You can't just blanketly designate every position as a special municipal employee. It has to be done as an issue comes up.
Is it for a period of time?
Nope. You can make it for a period of time
Right.
if you would like, but it does not
You
have to
didn't
be.
have to be. Okay.
so right now it's just those two departments, assessors and Board of Health, that are running into this conflict.
The boards.
So what was the issue that we had with
That's what I was just trying to see if I
Mr.
could find it.
Pendergast,
Because I thought you
who was on
couldn't do it
Council on
if they were
Aging and wanted to be a
employed by the
van
town.
driver as a senior work-off? And because it was within his group that he was the chair, we wouldn't allow him.
So that was a select board policy.
No, but this has also come up with the cemetery commissioner and members wanting to also do some of the work in the cemetery.
Right.
Mr. Pendergast had more of a problem with hours.
Yeah.
Right.
So
With
you
what?
cannot.
It was more of an hours situation with him
Right.
because it came to personnel.
Okay.
And it was more, he was working more, it's only 100 and, well, back then it was 125. I know it's changed.
No, that's what it's still.
It's still 125.
But he was doing more than
The 125.
The
those
125.
hours. And then after
And then
he
they
was
had to
done his
pay him.
125, then he wanted to get paid, and that can't happen on senior work-off.
Okay.
Senior work-off, and that's why it got switched to a real position now. The van driver is no longer a senior work-off.
Okay.
But they were working past the 125, and we had a couple other positions too that were then being paid for that.
Okay. I also thought maybe it was because it was within,
No.
I
he
know what
just-
you're thinking of.
You know.
CBA, we had this question come up. You can't supervise yourself, okay?
right.
So there was a question that came up at one point of if you're a senior work-off and you're on a board, can you do work for that board? And the answer is no,
Okay.
because you can't supervise yourself.
Right.
So in these cases, and well, I can only speak to the one that's ongoing at the moment. The other one was just an inquiry as to whether or not this could be allowed. But you're not allowed to supervise yourself, essentially. So I can tell you in the case of the Board of Assessors, that person is not working in any capacity in senior work-off for the assessors.
I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's the way that it really
I mean, I
should
don't
be
know
under
that-
conflict of interest. It's dicey, and we got a kind of a ruling of how that should be done a while. I think when I first started, this question came up actually. So yeah, that's really the way that it should be, because the state could potentially have an interest, question with that, because technically you could be directing your own work and sort
Right.
of controlling what's going on from both an employee and a board standpoint, and that gets a little bit confusing. But there
Yeah.
also are disclosures you can file, because we've had this come up on cemetery with a contracted employee.
Right.
And there was a way to do a municipal disclosure that allowed that person to serve both on the cemetery commission and also work as a contractor.
Right.
So the law is very complicated.
Oh, I know.
And so that's why I always tell the individual, call the attorney of the day at the state. They'll talk to anybody. And in this case, this individual was advised to call, and they said, both of those positions do need to be designated as SMEs. So that's why this is coming to you.
And Chris, the other thing too was that senior work off, according to the Massachusetts laws, they are not supposed to do something that is an actual position. They're
Right.
only supposed to do a task. And the van driver was considered
That makes sense.
a
An
position.
actual position.
It's not a quick task.
I thought we actually changed our bylaw to
We-
include whatever it was that we.
Yeah, we did a lot of work on that because it was as you know, back then it was an issue.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if the current policy just needs to have a line or something written in it, because, think of the people that it went through. Peggy Sardell, longtime admin to the select board, knows COA like the back of her hand, with that, so, and I'm sure whoever signed off on the work probably didn't know, and if it went to the COA director, who has, ultimate sign-off, I guess, if it was missed by those three people, then it needs to be written down that in the event there may be an occasion where blah, 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 so that people know a year from now, somebody who works for the insert department here, who is looking to do senior work off, may be required to come back to the board for approval, just so it's upfront, clear, everyone knows. So we don't run into this where you're talking about it being retroactive, especially with tax bills whizzing through the mail.
And really what it comes down to, and there are some exceptions because of our size. If you're under a population of 5,000, you're allowed to hold 2 positions in certain cases, but ethics advise in this specific case with senior work off, particularly in the case of the Board of Assessors, because they do oversee the work off program, that this should be made a special municipal employee position.
Hmm.
Assessors oversee, so they have more
The
jurisdiction?
department oversees the senior work off program. The assessor, who is overseen by the Board of Assessors.
So,
I'm fine with it.
do you want to?
I know, it's
I'll make
way
the
more
motion
complicated
that
than-
the Board of Assessors and Board of Health and the senior work-off are designated as special municipal employees,
Retroactive.
retroactive to July 1st.
And we're sure that the work started in July, so we're not going to come, fiscal year, never mind, I answered my own question. Second.
Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 And I think we were going to do the exec minutes on a future meeting. Oh, I jumped. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Board questions on the agendas, and liaison updates?
Start down there?
There was correspondence on school fees assessed to town committees. The rec committee being
Mhm.
charged suddenly and after the fact, several $1,000s to use for their basketball thing.
Yeah, I just saw that this afternoon.
And although
I didn't have a chance to look at the policy, the building use
No.
policy yet.
I
well,
haven't had
it would be
a
the
chance to get into it
the
either.
school's
Right.
building use policy, not ours.
Exactly.
But that I would love to see if there's a way we can encourage the schools to continue to let some of our town committees use the school, considering how much money we put into the school.
Well, I mean,
Because where that money's gonna come from, it's gonna potentially come from the taxpayers as well, and so.
Well, you know what, you know why, I think the building use policy, but I haven't had a chance to look at it,
Hmm?
hasn't been being followed. And that's,
It could be, telling a group
but
24 hours before their long session starts.
Right.
That they have a several $1,000 bill due that they were never told of before, never in their history have had to do anything with, doesn't seem,
Is this
Great.
because of the gym?
Janitor?
yes.
That was an agreement that was made before when Rob McKay was on, that they were actually charging for the use of the gym, and the recreation was supposed to pay for half of the floor.
No,
Fixing
no,
the floor.
no, the fixing the floor, they're fine with. This is paying to have
This is
staff
paying to-
there while they're
Oh,
doing
okay.
it, which is, again, new and a change.
Right.
Okay.
And I just,
Well,
to me, it feels, if I was a person who had an agreement and I've done something for years, and then suddenly right before I did it again, someone said, oh yeah, all of a sudden, we're now gonna charge you
right.
several $1,000s for this, just,
I think probably a conversation between Carol Costello and Julie would probably solve the problem.
No, I think there needs to be a letter too, or something like that. I mean, my concern
But
too.
we're not involved with this.
No, there's a letter in her email.
That's the policy.
No.
Oh, the letter, yes,
That
to us.
to us that we need to write some type of letter to get it,
Fixed.
to get the fee waived. I mean, my concern too is that that policy is dated 2022, and it's now 2023, and as Scott said, basketball started on a Saturday, and they gave them that policy. I'm sure they probably went through all the pricing to set up that.
But we don't even know the issues as far as why Carol is asking rec to pay. It could be a mass general law that they're not been following, or, we don't know. That's.
I can tell you the last 14 years of my kid's life, it's a norm. Like, we pay the high school for grass field fees, turf field fees, gymnasium fees, like every league,
Yep.
whether it's lacrosse, soccer, basketball, baseball, we pay the schools for all that.
But here's my question, why do you have to pay a janitor to sit there for all those hours? I can understand, especially with how Berlin's laid out, you're blocked off from the school, so it's not like anyone can roam around. So
Well, I mean-
go open the building,
Yeah.
come back
Union
and clean it. I
contract.
don't understand why somebody needs
What's
to
that?
sit there for 5 hours.
Well, I mean, that's the way I felt about the turf field fees. Like,
We
I'm
always have
sorry.
a 4-hour minimum for the gym, because you've got, the person has to basically hang around to open and close. So it might be in their union contract too. Why don't I do this? Let me talk to Carol and talk to Julie and try to get some more information on this and get to the bottom of it.
Well, the one thing that I was going to ask you is, this may be something, I think it had been discussed at some point that this also be part of the lease, like
Okay.
clearing this kind of thing up. Not particularly the janitor thing, but
Okay.
we were thinking of, or I was thinking of, might be a good idea to put the building use policy as part of the lease.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So yeah, there's an item in here, there's a paragraph from Julie saying, Carol did mention that if the town has this arrangement with that space during non-school session time, she would need something in writing. So that's where I think that we come in, and that's probably why I'm gonna guess she came to us.
Well, okay. How about, let us know if you talk to Carol,
I'll get some more
and I'll
information.
go home and read the rest of what I didn't read yet.
Yeah, I came in late last night, so let me get to the bottom of it, get some more information, and I can get back in touch with everybody.
Okay. Anything else, Peg?
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say, that was mine, but yes.
Oh,
I don't-
that
I don't-
was yours.
I don't
I'm
have
sorry.
anything more, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so all three of mine were active. Energy, they have confirmed that CMRPC will be continuing to provide their green community information, which is lovely. The $17,000 in the adder, I think that the chair of Energy, Kristen, has either spoken with you or is going to speak with you regarding how that will be used for the assessment. And in regard to the building assessment and the energy assessment, Energy wants just to be sure that they can have a look at whatever the results are at
Sure.
the end of the year. And they suggested planning as well. I told them I did not know who was on like the final look-see for that information.
My goal was to distribute that as broadly and far and wide as we could to get input on it
Okay.
before we finalize it.
All right, so for Concom, they were waiting on information for some type of land donation around Dudley Road. Hadn't come in yet. Owl banding continues. They have about 50 to date. Last ones are this week. The chair openly talked about the Verizon cell tower agreement, so do we need to have any more discussions on that? Because she talked about it and it's on camera and...
Yeah, if it's in open session and the
She did?
chair actually emailed me, she didn't say it was an open session, so I hadn't said anything yet. But
Oh, she
feel
brought it
free
up.
to share.
She
what-
brought it up in open session last week, saying that it would be a 50-50 split. And of course, there were a few comments about why 50-50
And that's not exactly in line with what we had proposed, so the board would need to, we would need to have a further discussion about where we go from here.
so that's why I wanted to ask that the numbers seem to change a little bit. Tohoto Community Service, they had reached out to Tohoto in regard to having some senior kids do some cleanup on the trails. But, well, no one showed up. So, so obviously they need to work on better communication. They'll probably do something in the spring. Highland Ridge, we've beaten to a dead horse. And let's see, December 6th, will be a hybrid meeting to discuss rail trail. So I don't have any more details on that besides it will be on December 6th.
Who's doing that?
Oh, God, what was his name? Conservation, and they're bringing somebody in.
Greg Delapenna,
Thank you. Who is a real estate person, correct?
he writes books.
Okay.
He's part of a friend of the rail trail. He's not part of DCR.
Probably not,
Okay.
because she stated it would be a hybrid meeting.
Okay, because cable access has to be informed and has to be available in order to do a hybrid meeting. I can reach out or however you
I'll
want.
It's all true, their December 6th meeting is not posted as hybrid.
All right, I will reach out to her
Thank you.
and ask her.
We may be ready at that point. That is, I hope we're ready. There are literally emails flying back as we speak about trying to work out the last couple of little bugs. So,
And then finally on, for rec, on December 3rd, which is a Sunday from 3 to 5, down at First Parish Church. Eric, I saw all the emails coming your way, and I think to Chief McQuillan and Highway and assorted other folks, that they will be doing some form of holiday events down there. And I've been asked to MC it, so this is my 4th one, so I'm in costume searching mode. Never know what I'll find out, what I'll come out as this year. Last year was an angel, and people were a little bit shocked when I strolled out walking in that, so we'll see how I can top it this year.
There you go, right here.
That's your mug.
I know. I know. I've looked, and they're horrible. I even get scared looking at them. They're bad costumes for the Grinch, so we'll see what I can find. But I know that Rec put some stuff out on Berlin Neighbors Connect in regard to all the activities. I think it'll be between the church serving food and some gingerbread, I think, across at 1870. But I just said that I would push the event. I'm not involved in
And this
planning.
is on the,
December 3rd, which is a Sunday, the
December 3rd.
first Sunday of the
Oh.
month.
Hmm.
And that's all I got from my peeps.
okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of holiday events going on the 2nd and 3rd in town.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a formal organizing to it, but just a lot of people, because that's typically been when holidays in Berlin have been, that a lot of
Correct.
people are just doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a Santa. I know that they reached out to Chief McQuillan to get the sleigh out of the Rudolph building for photo purposes. So, don't really know any more than that, what's going on with that. Okay.
So, I didn't know whether I had given this report. It's so old. If it sounds familiar, just tell me to stop. The Council on Aging, because it's back on October 24th.
You gave some updates.
Are you
Yeah.
sure? They've got a new yoga called SAIL Yoga, SAIL, Stay Active and Independent for Life. And Tai Chi also, and both attendance is solid. They did hire a new van driver, because I know that's happened, huh? COA had a discussion on transportation for Berlin residents, which I think Bob Blair is on the Worcester end of it.
Yes, he
And
is
then
our WRTA rep.
Yes. They did vote to appoint a new member to the Council on Aging. Her name is Linda Sinclair. She's a physical therapist. The Digital Literacy Grant Director has hired the Digital Literacy Grant. The director of COA has hired a retired teacher to teach the class. And they may do some more interactive tours in January. I don't know if anybody was involved in that. It's something that you say, okay, I'd like to do it, and they send you a link, and you, like, for example, go through the Art Museum in Worcester,
Oh, nice.
or the Art Museum in Boston, or other different areas. So, but their next meeting, oh geez, is November 28th. So,
Next week.
so if that's everything, and we're going to defer our approval of the executive session minutes,
Yes.
then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconded?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.